You can grow corn 6 feet tall and still pull that husk back to a half empty cob. It's not the soil, not the sun, it's not the seed. It's one thing a lot of us get wrong well before those silks even show up. So, welcome to Yard Eaters. My name's Matt. Today, we're going to talk about corn. I'm going to explain to you exactly how corn pollinates itself and, just as an added extra sense of security, how to do it manually by hand. Let's get started. So here's something you may or may not have known. A corn plant has both a male and a female end. Botanists call this monoecious. I don't know if I'm still saying that word right or not, but it's something like that. But that's not the point. Here, let me show you. Up here, this feather duster right here, this is the male end. And all of these little flowers you see, these are called anthers. These are your pollen factories. Now these are gonna open up, a handful of them are gonna open up every single day, and they're gonna drop pollen down. You can actually see it. See that pollen? They're gonna drop it down to the silk. Now here's your female flower. This is where your husk is. And so, fun fact, every single one of these silks needs to connect to one kernel on your cob to pollinate it. So you can have 400 or 600 kernels on a cob, but you're always gonna have more silks. So the name of the game when we get into pollinating is we have to make sure every single one of these silks gets some pollen on it from these anthers. You see them falling right here. From these anthers coming up from up here, or you'll have some kernels on your cob that aren't pollinated. So left alone, corn will self-pollinate using the wind. There's no bees needed or anything. The tassel makes an absurd amount of pollen. One of these single tassels puts out somewhere between 2 to 5 million grains. Doing that math, that's like thousands of grains for every silk that we need to pollinate. And it doesn't dump all at once. Those little dangling parts on the tassel, those are the anthers. That's where the pollen actually comes out. Each anther will fire once, and then it sheds in about 3 minutes, dries up and drops off. Morning after morning, and they do this over one single tassel for 1 to 2 weeks. So the pollen falls, the wind carries it, and it lands on the silk. And within minutes, the grain starts to grow a tube down that silk strand, and in about a day or so, it fertilizes the kernel at the end of that strand. So just like how two people have to meet at the same time, two things on this plant have to happen at the same time. And farmers call this the nick. So the two things are, the tassel has to be shedding pollen, and the silk has to be out and fresh. Growers call that overlap the nick. Now when a corn plant is healthy, it'll nick on its own. The tassels will pop out around the same time as the silks. But that's a really short window, and there are a few things to keep in mind to make sure this happens. So silks come out of the ear from the bottom first and the tip last. Read that again, because it explains your gappy tips. The kernels at the very end of the cob are the last to put out a silk. If the pollen is mostly gone by the time those tips appear, the tips never fill. That's not a fertilizer problem, that's a timing problem. Each silk stays receptive for about 10 days, but the real action is the first 4 or 5 days. After that, their receptiveness to pollen drops off significantly. And the daily clock matters too. So on a normal sunny day, peak pollen sheds in the morning, roughly 9 to 11, with the second time in the late afternoon. Pollen only lives about a day once it's out. So pollination is a morning event, day after day for about a week. Now the number one thing that's probably gonna keep you from having a bunch of kernels on your cob is dry soil when these are trying to pollinate. So that silk is the wettest tissue on that entire plant. And if that silk gets dry or it gets stressed, it can stop moving out of the plant, it can stall, and even worse, it can dry out and actually stop accepting pollen. So dry conditions at this time of year while it's trying to pollinate is one of the worst enemies you're going to run into. The make or break window runs about 2 weeks before tasseling to 2 weeks after, and the single most important stretch is the week right before the tassel opens. If your soil is dry in that window, you water deeply This is the one time of the season I will drag a hose out every day if I have to. Heat plays in too. A hot, dry wind during silking can desiccate silks even if the soil's okay. So aim your watering at keeping the plant unstressed right through pollination. Two things make this easier on you. A thick mulch layer, a few inches of straw or shedded leaves, just anything to keep that moisture in the soil, and a drip line at the base to deliver water where the roots are. Okay, so when we want to maximize the yield of our corn, there are 4 things that we can do, and I don't want to hear in the comments that I'm not doing a few of them because I know I have a small yard. So let's look at the first one. The first one is planting in blocks. So research unanimously supports this. You should have at least a 3x3 grid of corn to grow in. So move 1, plant in a block, never a single row. This is a big one. Forget the long rows. Plant in a square. The research is consistent across basically every university extension out there. Minimum 3x3 grid. 4x4 is even better. But the whole point of this is when the pollen sheds inside that block, it'll land on a neighbor and not just blow off into your lawn. A block also props itself up against the wind. I know about this. Look at what I'm having to do here. So I'm having to prop up almost all of my corn because it'll eventually fall. I'm gonna have to redo that one. It'll eventually fall. So yeah, that's a big deal. Move 2, and I'm also not following this one, but don't crowd your plants. They need space to grow. You can cram more plants and more total ears, but the ears get smaller and the tips fill in worse. Studies on plant density show ear length and tip fill drop off as the plants start to pack in tighter and tighter. So if you're chasing big, beautiful, fully filled ears for your table, give your plants about 8 to 12 inches apart and the rows 2 to 3 feet apart. Move 3, these things need to eat. They are heavy feeders. Work compost or fertilizer in before planting, then side dress nitrogen twice. Once when the plants are about knee high, and again when those tassels show up. The plant is building the ear and the kernels right at flowering, so don't let it run hungry going into the nick. Move 4, water through pollination. This plant needs water constantly. And I know we spoke about it earlier, but it's worth repeating. Now for the part that y'all been waiting for. Just curious, when you woke up this morning, were you expecting to be a plant intimacy coach? No? Well, today you are. Okay, first, let's talk method. Let's look at these real quick. So, here are your pollen factories, right? If you look really closely, you can see, yes, we have some anthers that are open, but there's a lot of other anthers on here that aren't open yet at all. A lot of people like to cut these and then take it down here and rub it all over the silks. But what's going to happen is these flowers are going to slowly pop out over an entire week or so. So if I cut this on Monday, I'm getting rid of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday flowers. So instead, let's harvest the pollen. My card ran out of memory, but what I was saying was instead, let's harvest the pollen that's falling everywhere. Look at all this pollen. Let's harvest this in a cup or in a bag, paper bag, and put it on the silks. So step 1, pick a morning, midday. Come out here and make sure that all of the anthers are actually out and they're starting to drop pollen. You can pretty easily tell. You can just come over here and flick one. Usually you can't see it on camera, but if you come over here and flick it, you can see the pollen falling, and you can also see the pollen all over the leaves below it. So this is a good time to start harvesting. Step 2 is collecting the pollen, so I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Okay, let me show you how this is done. So I'm going to put this cup right under these flowers. I'm going to flick them around. See that? Pollen in there? Now step 3, we're going to take that pollen and we're going to dust the silks with it to pollinate them. Watch this. So a few things to call out from my pollinating tactic. I prefer the plastic cup because the paper bags are a little more porous and this pollen is very fine. I basically take the cup and I rotate it over the silk and I tap it, so all the pollen that's in the cup gets launched out into the air and hopefully lands on the silk before it slides out the cup. And then step 4, my favorite part, you're gonna do this again and again. You're gonna look like a fool to your neighbors for a solid week. You can go tell them what you're doing if you want, but I mean, won't change anything. They're still gonna talk about you. But you will have homegrown corn. Well, that's the whole story. Corn has both parents on one plant, lucky it. You can leave it up to the wind, but at least make sure you are planting it in a grid. Make sure as well that you are watering it thoroughly during pollination. Give it space, don't crowd it, and, you know, just to be the talk of the town, why don't you self-pollinate it yourself? If you do that, I promise you, your ears will be filled to the tip. So, eat the good stuff, stay healthy, I'll see you next time.